Here's the brief. News from the world over this week. On Easter Monday, Pope Francis issued another urgent appeal on behalf of persecuted Christians around the world. In the wake of the killing of 148 Christians by al-Shabaab jihadists in Kenya, the Holy Father said it would be, quote, an alarming failure to protect basic human rights if the international community were to remain silent and inactive, as Christians are exiled, killed, and beheaded for only being Christians. They are our martyrs, he added, and they are many. Meanwhile, Kenyans are continuing to mourn those massacred at Garissa University. This past week, 4 al-Shabaab gunmen stormed the university in northeastern Kenya, initially taking hostage more than 700 students. Systematically, they freed the Muslims and killed those who identified as Christians. The militants were killed in a standoff with government forces. Kenyan Cardinal John Jue met with grieving families on Wednesday. The bereaved father here invested the entirety of his family's savings to pay for his son's education.
I don't have any compassion for the terrorists because I took my child to school. Today I'm taking dead. Today we are completely desperate. We have no future. We are only being given hopes. But the gateway to see that hope, bleak.
And back in the U.S., on Wednesday, a federal court found Dzhokhar Tsarnaev guilty of 30 criminal counts for his involvement in the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing. His life is now in the hands of the 12 jurors who convicted him. He faces the death penalty. Tsarnaev and his brother Tamerlane built, placed, and detonated 2 shrapnel-packed pressure cooker bombs near the marathon's finish line. 3 spectators and a police officer were later killed. Hundreds were wounded. The Catholic bishops of Massachusetts have voiced their opposition to a death sentence in the case, citing the Catechism of the Catholic Church and recent comments by Pope Francis on capital punishment. The bishops argue that since Tsarnaev has been neutralized and will never again have the ability to cause harm, there's no need for the death penalty. The jury must reach a unanimous decision for Tsarnaev to be executed. Talks over Iran's nuclear program have shifted from Switzerland to Washington, D.C., as President Barack Obama lobbies Congress to approve a nuclear deal with Iran. This past week, Iran and 6 world powers agreed to a framework deal that would seek to curb their bomb-making technology while lifting international sanctions against Tehran. Facing skepticism from Capitol Hill to Tel Aviv, the president on Monday rejected the notion that Iran had to formally recognize Israel for a deal to happen. He said it would be unrealistic to expect a complete transformation of the Iranian regime as a prerequisite for a deal.
We want Iran not to have nuclear weapons precisely because we can't bank on the nature of the regime changing.
Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is questioning why Iran would be allowed to retain more than 6,000 centrifuges. He said the deal establishes an internationally recognized 10-year nuclear research and development program in Iran. The country's supreme leader, Ayatollah al-Khamenei, stopped short of giving his endorsement to the framework. On Thursday, he said he is neither for nor against it. And the temporary injunction against President Obama's executive action on immigration will remain in effect. U.S. District Judge Andrew Hanen in Brownsville refused to lift his preliminary injunction ruling. He said the government hasn't shown any credible reason why the Obama directive necessitates immediate implementation. The immigration order seeks to protect up to 5 million illegal immigrants from deportation. The case will be heard by the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans on April 17th. And on Tuesday, Kansas Governor Sam Brownback signed into law a bill banning dismemberment abortions. It is the first of its kind. Under the law, doctors cannot dismember and extract an unborn child one piece at a time from the uterus. Commonly used during the second trimester, a dilation and extraction abortion rips the fetus apart as it's suctioned from the uterus. The measure is also being considered in Missouri, Oklahoma, and South Carolina. Abortion rights groups are considering a challenge. And Kentucky Senator Rand Paul became the GOP's newest presidential candidate this week. He announced his bid in his home state of Kentucky. During a combative address against both Washington's special interests and his Beltway Republican colleagues, Paul declared, "We've come to take our country back."
Too often, when Republicans have won, we've squandered our victory by becoming part of the Washington machine. That's not who I am.
Much like fellow GOP Senator and presidential candidate Ted Cruz, Paul is a favorite among reform-minded conservatives and Tea Party Republicans. Another GOP Senator, Florida's Marco Rubio, will announce his presidential bid on April 14th. And presidential hopeful Jeb Bush offered some praise for Pope Francis this week. In an interview with Catherine Jean Lopez of National Review on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of his conversion to Catholicism, Bush commended the Pope for the remarkable way he says the simplest things to draw people to his beliefs. He also cautioned that there might be real disappointment for people who simply think this guy is really cool and are expecting big changes in doctrine. When asked if Pope Francis' more relaxed attitude could help Catholics in public life, especially in the wake of the Indiana religious liberty controversy, Bush said, "Absolutely. I do think he can change the conversation because right now it's just full of landmines." Bush went on to say that public discourse needs to get beyond us versus them, and he suggested the Pope may be leading the way. To that end, for the third year in a row, Pope Francis has used Holy Thursday to reach out to those considered to be on the margins of society. The Pope reenacted Jesus' washing of his apostles' feet by washing the feet of 12 inmates from Rome's main prison, one of them a transsexual. The Pope has broken with tradition in the last few years, having washed the feet of women, Muslims, and non-Catholics. In an interview with Italy's TV 2000, the transsexual, who goes by the name Isabel, said she's been moved by Pope Francis and that her faith has grown. Besides having her feet washed by the Pope on Thursday, Isabel also received Holy Communion during the Mass. And the battle to reform the Church during the upcoming Synod for the Family is on. This, according to Cardinal Walter Casper, who's tasked with leading the Holy Father's efforts for the consideration of reforms. In a recent interview with David Gibson of Religious News Service, the man dubbed the Pope's theologian said that a battle is going on regarding the practices toward divorced and remarried Catholics and to better welcome gay people and unmarried couples who live together. He further claimed that a great majority of people are expecting some changes in pastoral practice. As such, he said Pope Francis must now make some changes that are visible. Casper called his newest book a campaign tract. Opposing Cardinal Casper, the bishops of Poland this week officially endorsed a Polish-language version of the book Remaining in the Truth of Christ. The book was written by 5 cardinals in response to Casper's push for reform. Cardinal Wilfrid Napier of Durban, one of the 4 president delegates at the upcoming synod, took to Twitter to criticize Cardinal Casper. Responding to the Gibson interview, the South African cardinal tweeted, quote, "It's a real worry to read an expression like the Pope's theologian applied to Cardinal Casper. Why? Unlike Pope Francis, Cardinal Casper isn't very respectful toward the African Church and its leaders. Cardinal Casper considers African bishops to be excessively controlled by taboo and too reticent to address polygamy and similar marriage problems," end quote. At last year's synod, Cardinal Casper was widely criticized for comments about the African bishops that were viewed by some as condescending and racist. And the Pew Research Center is reporting some seismic changes in world religions by the year 2050. If current trends hold, those who profess to be Muslim will nearly equal Christians, 29 to 31% of the world's population, respectively. Also of note, 40% of the world's Christians will live in sub-Saharan Africa. And in the U.S., numbers of Christians will decline by about 10%, comprising about 2/3 of the U.S. population. Judaism will no longer be the largest non-Christian religion. Muslims will be more numerous than Jews in the U.S. by 2050. And some good news on the vocations front for 2015. Georgetown's Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate reported a 20% increase in priestly ordinations this year. Nearly 600 men are expected to receive holy orders for the priesthood by the end of 2015. And the Pope has ventured into more new territory, the music business. In collaboration with Italian-Argentine musician Odino Faccia, the two men have written a pop song about peace. The lyrics, from "So We Can All Be One," are taken from phrases in the Pope's various homilies. A Vatican spokesman told CBS News that Pope Francis saw the lyrics in advance and gave them his stamp of approval. The song, a highly commercial number with a danceable Latin rhythm, was written and performed in Spanish. Sony Music said Portuguese, Italian, and English versions are in the works. The Pope probably saw those Benedictines topping the Billboard charts and thought, why not?